Hi, and welcome to Commissioner's Corner. I'm your host, Lois Leonard, and thanks for joining us. The vote was unanimous last year when the Boston City Council agreed to ban single-use plastic bags in retail stores. And with Mayor Walsh's support, the new policy will soon take effect. The message is clear: convenience does not outweigh the cost to our environment. And with us today to help us understand how the new policy will work is William Christopher Jr., Commissioner of Boston's Inspectional Services Department. Welcome.
Good morning.
It's great to see you. Thank you for being here. I'm sure you have a busy day because you have a very large department to control. So why don't we start, if you would, by maybe explaining to us and giving us a little better understanding of how your department is organized.
Sure. Inspectional Services is made up of basically 5 departments. We have our building division, which deals with most commercial buildings and all general types of construction. We have our housing division, which focuses on housing issues and the enforcement of the sanitary code. We have weights and measures, which is the analytical teams of inspectors that verify that scale, when it reads a pound, is actually a pound. When the gas tank says it's a gallon, it's actually a gallon. We have our health department, which primarily manages the food markets in the city and the restaurants, the letter grading system people are familiar with. And the final division is our environmental department, which deals a lot with rodent and insect infestations throughout the city and areas.
Your departments, they handle a lot of behind-the-scenes things that we just take for granted.
Well, we've always felt that we were the unsung heroes, but the department is really made up of a group of very dedicated people that understand, the needs of our constituents, and that's always our primary goal. Life safety is a very important issue. Mayor Walsh has made it very clear that the quality of life for all people in our city is the paramount issue. So we are able to, in most cases behind the scenes, be able to deliver that so that we make sure that all the minimum standards are being met and issues and questions are being addressed properly.
So you're here, we're going to help you, and you're going to help me get the message out.
Sure.
All righty, so let's start with the plastic bag policy. We know that this is going to go in effect technically on December 14th, but
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the consumer will expect at
Sure.
that time?
There's a couple things about it that's very important. People have to understand that this is really about at the checkout point. This will not have an effect when you're bagging your apples or meat or the smaller issues. It'll not affect your dry cleaning bags or your newspaper bags. It's the point of sale is the way we've been dealing with it. So if the plastic bags that we're so used to dealing with now are really quite a nuisance on our environment in a number of ways, not only from general cleanliness, but it's also marine life, and everybody sees them hanging in the trees. So the mayor, working with the city council, has decided to have one more step towards a much greener city. So we've put this ordinance together. ISD is going to be the enforcement agency. The policy actually lives in the environment department, which is working very hard to green our city. And we're all in support of it, so it's something that we have to work out. Inspectional Services, along with the environmental department, has been doing an awful lot of community meetings because we want people to hear about it firsthand. The major issues that you have to be aware of is that, again, bags with handles are not going to be allowed. We do not want to economically or socially affect people's lives, so we're trying to be realistic about how we deal with this. The mayor is, with many consumers and many businesses, is now handing out recyclable bags. Most of us have them. There's that drawer in the kitchen or behind the closet door. And the biggest inconvenience will be just you have to remember to take them with you.
That is so true.
Stores will be allowed or are required to actually charge 5 cents for any bag that they provide.
And actually, they're required to charge
Yes.
at least 5 cents for the bags. So
Right.
get
And
that word out there. Don't blame the store.
absolutely, and that money remains in the store to offset some of their costs. But we do want people to be responsible, and if we run into situations where we feel stores are excessively charging for that, we do want to know about it.
Sure.
It's not against the ordinance at all, but we do think from a community point of view, we want to address it to see if we can help it. So we're going to roll it out in 3 phases. First, we're going to start with the 20,000 square foot stores, the big box stores, the big supermarkets. That's what rolls out on December 14th. And then on April 1st, it's going to go down to 10,000 square feet. So that's the more medium-sized variety stores and convenience stores.
Like a CVS?
Yes.
Okay.
And then finally, the act will go into full effect on July 1st. Important to note that if you run, a community bazaar or a religiously based function, they're exempt from this ordinance. We're not trying to burden the whole world. We're trying to just make a statement about how the city feels about the environmental issues.
So you mentioned this already, but just to reiterate, if it's a bag that you put your apples in, that's fine. It's just bags with handles that are now, the thin plastic bags are not going to be allowed. And stores will be providing, if they choose to, recyclable bags, different material bags that you can purchase.
Yes, and there are plastic bags that are recyclable. The thin, small ones are not recyclable. They're just too thin. But the bag has to be stamped and certified that it is a recyclable bag. Stores are also required to post within, I believe it's 5 feet of the cashier, the actual cost of the bags. And it's required to show up on your receipt, the cost of that bag.
So, most of us, when we think about this, we think of grocery stores as the first thing that comes to mind. But this will affect a store like Target or Walmart, the big stores, which are a little different because quite often you buy things that are very large. So the stores, by law, are also not required to provide you with bags, which is something that was new to me. I didn't know about that. But so what would you expect if you go shopping at a store like that?
Well, there's one thing that I do have to mention is that some of the larger stores may have a huge inventory of these bags. And it's not going to be a drop dead date for us. What we're going to do is if you have an inventory that you can show us, and you apply for a variance, we'll allow you an extension of 1 year. So you're not just blatantly throwing away these bags. They will get some use. But they have to apply to the environmental department for that waiver, and it'll be
each individual store or the corporate chain?
It can work under a corporate chain.
Okay.
But we have to identify where the locations are for each of the stores.
Sure, because we are just talking about the city of Boston.
That's right.
Now. Okay.
Absolutely. We're hoping consumers will be providing their own reusable bags for the day-to-day stuff. The larger box stuff, like, I don't know, if you buy a bundle of clothing at Target or a place like that, you may be dealing with multiple bags. But it's the idea that if we don't do this unilaterally across the city, it'll have no effect.
It has to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
We've all seen our streets and our curbs littered with these bags, and we understand how this does negatively affect our environment, but it seemed to have taken a long time to actually get this policy into effect. What were the concerns against it?
Well, there were economic concerns. We were really concerned about the elderly and the cost of having to deal with these bags. This is just, a lot of folks live on very fixed incomes, and we did not want this to have a negative impact at all. So it did. It took us, I know it was first promoted at the City Council by Councilor O'Malley, I think a year and a half ago. And we just had to work through the nuances to make sure that we were not going to have any unexpected results. We think we've got that into a good place right now. And yes, it did take a little longer than we would have liked, but we think that we're going to do it right, so it was worth the year's delay.
You mentioned a drive earlier with bags. Is there a provision in place to help the low income to provide them with bags?
The mayor, as he always does, he backs up his words with actions, and we are now distributing an awful lot of reusable bags. We're really promoting with some of the larger stores. Create your own bags. Put your logo on it. It's a walking advertisement around our city.
I just had a great idea. What a great craft idea for kids to give away as holiday presents. Here, Mom, here's a
We also
bag
thought,
for you.
From a school program that, if the school makes the bags and they can sell them for, $1 more than what the bag costs to make, is a way that, we get our children more engaged in what the economics of our city is, and we help resolve this problem.
I have to interject here and say I can't tell you how many times those bags are in my car and I'm in the store and first of all, it took me some time to get them into my car so I wouldn't forget them, and then I would forget them in the store. So habits are hard to break, but it's a habit that we are going to have to work at, and
again, that's part of
the city's help
phasing it out.
Yeah.
So that when you're doing your larger purchases right now, it'll be the first event. So and where the city in general is out to a lot of the communities, trying to explain to people what this is, to reinforce it. So it is a bit of a change in the way we shop, but we think that the city can deal with it.
Okay, so these are good changes for our city coming towards the end of this year and the beginning of the next. And as we close in on the beginning of a new year, there's a few other issues that we might want to talk about. There are new regulations regarding short-term rentals, Airbnbs, as I know them, as most of us call them. But specifically, there are different definitions in different situations. So can you discuss some of the new registration and regulations that are in place or coming on board?
That's an ordinance that will be going into effect in January 1. Step one will be registration. Everybody who is going to partake of this, and the guidelines are very specific about that it can only be in an owner-occupied 1, 2, or 3 family. There are different definitions for home share, additional unit, and extra unit. The room share, which is what most people are familiar with, where you in your own house rent out your bedroom. You'll be allowed to do that without a big issue. Your unit that you live in, you will also be able to rent out. But you have to make sure that you maintain enough presence in that building to maintain your residency here in the city of Boston. And then if you have an additional unit, you can also rent that unit out. But there are caveats. You can't rent them out simultaneously. They've got to be rented out separately. I'm
sorry, I have to ask. So if I own a couple different, I have 3 units in a building that I live in, I can't rent out 2 of them at the same time, on the same night?
3 is the perfect example. You live on the first floor.
Okay.
You can room share out of your unit anytime you want. You can rent the first floor as a short-term rental as long as you're registered for as much as you like. The second unit on the second floor, you have dedicated totally to short-term rental. You can do that for 365 days, but it cannot be rented out at the same time you're renting your unit on the first floor.
Okay.
And you can't rent out the third floor.
Okay, alrighty. And there's also some stipulations about how long you can rent these out. How many consecutive days?
The ordinance, and I always refer to it, unfortunately, but the days are all defined very specifically for each use group. You have to be an eligible unit, which means you are registered, that you're not a subsidized unit. Condos are excluded.
What about inspections?
Inspections?
On the building?
Well, the building will be, if it has an occupancy permit for a residential construction, it'll meet the requirements for the short-term rental. So we will be looking at that. If it's reported to us that there's illegal activity, you're renting out a unit and you're not registered, there'll be a fine, a daily fine. I believe it's $100 per day if you do that. If you rent out an ineligible unit, a unit that's not listed or that does not meet the requirements for eligibility, and it's all spelled in the ordinance, that's a $300 a day fine. And again, the goal for this is, like all of our ordinances, fines don't solve problems. They offset the cost of us having to resolve the problems. We would much prefer, through assistance is the way that we can best deal with our enforcement. So registration, paramount issue. If you are advertising on one of the social platforms that do this, and you're not a legal unit, we will fine you.
Yep.
And it'll be the burden of responsibility on you to prove that we issue that fine in error.
I want to say the registration process and the fee for an annual fee is not that high.
No.
So to not comply.
Well, the one hidden thing is in here is that you're going to be operating a business now. So you have to make sure that you register with the city council as a business. And that's really important. So that
Even if you rent, you're calling yourself an Airbnb and you only rent out one day in the whole year, technically, you need to be registered.
as a business.
And I would imagine, many of these people who are taking advantage of this in a good way, they've never owned a small business before.
No.
They've never considered that I have to register for something, I have to pay a fee for something. So do you think it's good advice to give those people and everyone, go online and get informed and know what you're getting into?
Online, we have a lot of information. The city's web base, there is a wealth of information there. We're looking at this, by putting it into the 1, 2, 3 families. This will be bringing guests from other parts of the state, the country, the world, to our neighborhoods, which we think will, improve the quality of businesses being available. It'll be an economic stimulus in a way that we haven't been able to touch before. So overall, we're excited about it. We've worked very closely with platforms. Will there be bumps in this? I guarantee there will be. But we're trying to be very open about it. We're trying to, work with the different people. The team at City Hall that's been working on this has been very interactive with all of the platforms that are out there. Sometimes we agree about the way we should do it, sometimes we don't. But again, we're trying to look at what is the best for the residents of our city, and that'll maintain the quality of our neighborhoods, as well as be able to advertise how great we are.
And I can't imagine it's that much of a surprise to anybody. There's been a lot of conversation of how to regulate, and this seems a very simple procedure. If you just go online, get informed, fill out that registration, do the right thing.
And we'll be there, if you have questions. The mayor has put together, the 311 hotline, whether you do it through a smartphone or you call on a landline. That's a great resource. It's been wonderful for inspectional services on all of our programs and enforcement endeavors, because once that call is made, and you can do it 24/7, the call will be routed to my office, to individuals. You will get a return phone call to let you know what it is. And I would so much prefer for someone to come to me in a proactive situation rather than me to have to reach out to them in a reactive situation.
And the fees for this, the annual fees, some of them are as low as $25 a year.
Yes.
And I believe in general the fee is only $200 a year for most of the situations.
Yeah, again, I never quote the ordinance because I've always got to look it up and make sure that I've got it right. The economic burden for the registration is really just to offset the cost for us to maintain the registers and make sure that we're not creating an undue burden to people that aren't taking care of it. So if you want the opportunity to do this and have some disposable income, it's a small price to pay, we think.
Okay. Let's switch gears here.
Sure.
And winter's coming. And which brings us into the heating season. In fact, the official heating season has already begun. It began on September 15th.
Yes.
I didn't know we had an official heating season.
Yes, it's part of the state sanitary code, which is enforced through our housing division. And you are required to maintain heat. I believe it's 68 degrees as a minimum during the day, and I think it drops down to 64 at night. The landlord, if you live in a multi-unit building, is responsible to make sure that happens. There has to be a source of heat in order for the tenant to take care of it, depending upon your agreement, whether you're supplying the fuel or the owner is supplying the fuel. It's something that we get a lot of responses on. So far, we've had a relatively soft beginning to our winter, but in the dead of winter, it becomes one of our more active issues. Again, our role is, if you find yourself in this situation, don't wait. Don't go 3 days without heat or without hot water, and then give us a call. It happens. You try to contact your landlord or the person responsible, property manager. If you don't get realistic response, you don't get a legitimate answer or a date when things are going to happen, give us a call. We're only too happy, and we will go out 24/7, because we do not want people to be in a situation that it's against code, but it's just inappropriate. And we will first try to interface with whoever the responsible party is to make sure this thing gets resolved and dealt with. In some of the more extreme cases, we get a lot more involved, and our last-ditch effort is if we have to relocate people. but we will not abandon people during the winter because it can be a life-threatening situation.
Well, maybe you're the expert. Maybe you can give some tips to property owners as to how they can keep their homes as energy efficient as possible for these next few months.
There's a number of things. One of them is proper maintenance. We find all too often, you know, some of the older boilers, they have these fuel heads that foul. They foul just about every year. Now is the time to get out and test your systems. Make sure things are done. Make sure the filters on all of the fluid lines have been checked and maintained. Windows, you have to make sure that you've got storm windows. Things are buttoned up and tight. Weather stripping around doors. These are all small investments by the owner of the building that can really reduce the demand on heating. We do not advocate portable heaters, the porcelain heaters, or the plug-ins. We've gone into situations where people have them on extension cords going across the room. Those are very dangerous things. You know, in a situation that is properly set up to deal with that, that's fine. But we do not promote those. You know, they cause fires, they can cause burns. The buildings all have heating systems. It's the responsibility of the owner or the property manager to make sure they're working, and then it's the responsibility of the tenant to make sure that they're vigilant, that if it isn't working, to let us know, to get us involved so we can help.
Okay. And when does the official heating season end?
I believe it's March 15th.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Great messages, a lot going on, and there always is. Again, your department, you oversee over 200 employees in your department, so we thank you for being here, and we'll have to talk again soon because I imagine there'll be some new news coming down the pike that we'll need to discuss.
It's ever changing, so we'll be glad to come back.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, our viewers, for watching. There's much that goes on behind the scenes at Inspectional Services that protects and improves our lives. It's a tall order for this department that enforces building, housing, health, sanitation, and safety regulations. Visit their website, boston.gov/ISD, or call their office at 617-635-5300 and get a better understanding of how your city works. As always, dial 311 or use the 311 app to report any non-emergency issues. I'm Lois Leonard, and we'll see you next time on Commissioner's Corner.